Alright, so this is going to be part one to what if Asta had sunshine. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
They took it to 10. Let me tell you how I come through with the 1-2, kicking shit like kung fu. Treat a bad bitch like she average. I'm a savage, little hoe, what you want do? I'm about cash if the raw fast. I'ma get that little nigga by any means.
So for this what if, this is going to be somewhat of a combination between two suggestions that I gotten. The first one was what if that Asta had sunshine, and the other was what if Asta was Yuno's like opposite. And when I mean what the person meant by that is that like he had like a fire grimoire that was a 4-leaf clover as well. So I'm gonna combine the two a little bit. It's gonna be a little bit different than each of them individually, I guess. So Asta's magic in this series is going to be called sunlight. So the difference between sunlight and regular light magic is that it's going to have properties of both fire and light. So it's going to be a mix between those two magics. This would also mean that it would also take both of the weaknesses that fire and light have. So it would be weak to dark, and it would also be weak to water. So and I guess time, I don't know if time, they're not like direct opposites or anything like that, but they do kind of rival each other. So I guess that could also be somewhat of a weakness. Before we get into the what if, I'm gonna upload my Q&A maybe today, maybe tomorrow, depending on how much time I have, and and my next review, for those of you waiting, which is probably no one, I'm going to do a review on Kaguya-sama Love is War. So if you want to watch the anime, binge watch it, since it is a pretty good anime, you can go and do that before I do the review. But it's gonna take a little bit longer because there's a lot more to say. I have a lot more to say about it, and there's a lot more chapters released, more than Shield Hero. So yeah. So the way that sunlight works, or sunshine works, the magical power that Escanor has from 7 Deadly Sins, the way that it works is that during the day, Escanor becomes stronger and becomes his strongest during noon. So that's when the sun is highest in the sky, I believe, and he becomes the weakest at night, right? And during the day he's very confident, but at night he's very shy and timid. But I guess in this one, since Asta was already naturally confident, I think that in this one, during the day he'll be confident, but at night he'll be like very cold and distant, somewhat like Yuno, but a little bit more harsher, I would think. So it's still like a bipolar effect, but in a different sense of the idea, right? So if you guys don't like that idea, then you could tell me in the comments. But with that being said, let's get into the actual what if now. So when Asta was, when he's brought to the church with Yuno, the character, there was no signs of any magic yet. All they knew was that they were born with like high amount of magic. And later on, Asta would start to notice that he's become very strong, and there was this kind of radiance of heat around him, right? And during the day, no one would go near him because of how hot the general area around him was. And I think this would end up hurting Yuno, and Asta would be very scared of his power, but I don't think it'd be like a very big injury like it was in 7 Deadly Sins where he broke his brother's arm, because Asta wouldn't be put in position to do that. And they would kind of, they would consult they would see this kind of shift in Asta where in the daytime he's very confident, but at night he's very, cold and distant. So at this point he's not very confident since he hurts people during the day. So what happened is they bring in another nun with water magic to kind of help Asta, right? Since they believe he has some sort of fire magic, since it has to do with heat. So what they do is they bring in Sister Lily to kind of consult him, since she has water magic, which is one of the weaknesses, and she's able to actually get near him using her water magic. And what happens here is that I think that Asta wouldn't see Sister Lily as, a romantic interest, because in this one he would see her more as a mother figure, or maternal figure, I think it's called, because in the original Asta was kind of set up to be, the kind of older sibling to take care of the children, and he's always been like that. So when Sister Lily came in, he didn't see her as a mother figure. He saw her more as someone to help out with what's already happening. So that's why he developed feelings for her. But in this one, I don't think that'd be the case, and I don't really like that kind of dynamic between the two in the show, because it kind of gives a reason on why none of the relationships advance in Black Clover, because of that particular reason. So I think what would happen is that Asta would learn how to kind of store the heat around him into a single spot on his back, just like Escanor does. So I haven't really read that much into Seven Deadly Sins, so if I get anything wrong about Sunshine, you could tell me, because I've only seen the anime, and I've only read a few chapters past that in the manga. So what would happen is that after learning how to control his power, I think Asta would become very confident, and Yuno would actually, how do you say this? He would kind of be like a follower to Asta, in that kind of sense. And we would get to the day when the priest or the father would give that kind of letter to go to give to another chief of a village to see if they could share supplies for the winter. And I think during the winter, Asta would be very liked, since he could emit heat, and that could warm people up during the winter. Because I believe it snows where Asta lives, in Hodge Village. I think it snows there, but I'm not sure. But anyways, it would go as in canon when he's giving that letter to the chief, and he's walking back to the village, and this is when a drunk man comes and sees a kind of necklace that's on Yuno's neck, right? And this is when Asta would come to save the day, because this is when the drunk man pushes Yuno to the ground and steals his necklace. And Yuno thinks of using his wind magic, but the guy says you wouldn't want to do that, and because that would give him a reason to fight back. So Yuno kind of sits down, or stays down. But then this is when Asta comes through, and he uses a little bit of his stored up energy to make him transform a bit, not as tall as he should be, but a little bit taller than Yuno, right? Probably around to the chest of the man, since Yuno was around his waist, I believe, or Asta was around his waist in the original canon. And this guy would just see this, he would think he was a teenager at this point, since he looks very buff, or somewhat buff, kind of lean, but also buff at the same time. Or, yeah, kind of lean, muscular structure, right? And he would think he's like a teenager, and he would say, "Move it, kid," right? And this is when Asta would like grab the guy's hand or his wrist. But this is like not the confident Asta, but more of the cold-hearted and distant one. And he would just say, "Scum like you make me sick," right? And the guy would be like, "How do you get off saying that to an adult, right?" And Asta would be like, "I don't care, right? You're a scumbag. You're gonna give that back, or I'm gonna break your wrist." And like, the guy's kind of shocked at what he said, and he tries to use his grimoire. But before he could do that, this is when Asta just snaps his wrist, or at least fractures it. So the guy like would go like fall to the ground on his knees and kind of hold his wrist, like he'd be like, "What the hell did you just do?" And Asta would just look at him with a glare and just would say, I gave you a warning, I gave you a choice, and you just did what you wanted, so I just did what I wanted." And this is when he would get the pendant or the necklace that he would drop, and the guy would just run away as fast as he could, and he'd give it back to Yuno. And I think Yuno would be excited about this since he was saved by Asta. And this is the point when both of them exclaim how they want to be the Wizard King and how they're going to be rivals. And I think that Yuno would kind of mimic Asta at night, so that's why he is how he is in he has the same personality as he does in canon, since he's like almost mimicking how Asta was at night. I'll say this again, in this version, Sunlight works a little bit different with the personalities between night and day. Day is still confident, but at night he, instead of timid and shy, he's more cold and distant, right? So Asta would continue to store energy for the next what is it, like 10 years? How old are they during the time where they Sister Lily came in? I'm not sure. Were they like around 5 or like 10? I'm not sure. But it's been a long time. At least 7, I think. 7 years. I think that's pretty accurate, or around the time. So if I get that wrong, then just tell me in the comments. So it'd be the day of when they're 15 and they're going to get the Grimoire. They would go to that tower that's there, and Yuno would get his Grimoire first, and everyone would be amazed since there's so much light emitting from it, and it's a 4-leaf. People would be say "Oh my gosh, that's just like the legends of the first Wizard King." And then this is when Asta's Grimoire would come. I think it'd be like a very almost like the thickness of like an encyclopedia or like a dictionary, kind of. That's what I'm thinking. So it'd be kind of heavy, right? But it's a 4-leaf Grimoire, and it's has sunlight magic. So it would come down from slowly, just like Yuno's, but it would be brighter. There'd be more light, so people would like kind of shield their eyes because there's so much light, because it's sunlight. So Asta would get it, and he would see Yuno's, and at this point I think Asta would be a little bit taller than Yuno in his buff form, and this one is kind of a more restricted buff form, so he'd still be taller, but not to the extent that he would be if he was full out power. Not the 1 power, but you know what I mean. So he would Asta would not notice people staring at him, and when he finally did, after reading his grimoire, he'd be like, "It's not polite to stare, but I could forgive you since you are staring at the future Wizard King." And people would be shocked to hear what he just said. Not only was he super cocky and confident, but he also said he was going to be the future Wizard King, right? And he would notice that Yuno would also have a 4-leaf grimoire, and he would say, well, nothing, I didn't expect anything less from my rival, right? But then Asta would be like, rival? I don't know if that's the right word, because I don't think anyone could rival me, but I think you're the closest, I guess. So, at this point, I think the two nobles would be angry at Asta. The two nobles that fight Yuno would be angry at Asta and Yuno, but I think they would go for Yuno first since he seems weaker. So Asta would be by himself, kind of in that area with the giant skull of the demon, and Yuno would be in that area that he is in canon. And the same things would happen with the chain mage wrapping himself or wraps chains around Yuno and the two not the two nobles, because I'm pretty sure the two nobles were knocked out. So he would explain to Yuno that he's going to sell his grimoire to the highest bidder as like a art piece, kind of, since they wouldn't be able to use it. And right when he's about to take it, this is when Asta comes through and says, he would probably say something like, "You, Magic Knight reject, what do you think you're doing to my rival?" And the chain mage would turn around and look at this tall, like, muscular teenager, and he would think that, "You think a newbie or rookie like you can beat me?" And he would use his chain magic to wrap himself around Asta, and Asta would let him because he was very confident. And this is when the chain mage says, "These chains can measure how much magical power someone has." And this is when he would read his, like, how much magic he has, and what would happen is that he'd be shocked at how much magic this man has, or Asta has, and he would kind of tumble back a little. And this is when Asta would say, "You know, chains aren't really reliable. It only takes one link in the chain to break the entire thing." And then this is when Asta would just kind of like flex, and this would break the chains apart, and the guy would be super surprised. And this is when he would try to use that one ability that uses the chains to kind of like slice people, but I think Asta would be able to dodge it. And then this is when he performs a small cruel sun, so he would be like sunlight magic, cruel sun, and be like he wouldn't put that much magical power into it since he's so much powerful than the chain mage, and it would like kind of slowly follow him at first. And the chain mage would be confused, like, what is this? And when he gets closer, he notices how much power is in it, so he tries to run. But before he could, like, run away, this is when this is when Asta would be, like, followed by Pride Flare, and he blows up the sun, the cruel sun, and it actually, like, damages the chain mage. But he didn't want to do a direct hit because that might have killed him, so that's why he blew it up instead. And this is all happening around sunset, so Asta isn't that tall or buff, so he's not so confident in himself. He's becoming a little bit more distant at this point. And this is when Yuno would tell Asta that, "Looks like you saved me again," right before doing that kind of fist pump that they do in the anime. And then this is when Asta would see the two nobles that were injured from the mage, from the sneak attack from the mage, and Asta would be like, such poor creatures, thinking they could even come close to be my to be the rival of my rival. Such a pity. And then this is when Asta opens his grimoire and says, healing sun rays, or he would say sunlight magic, healing sun rays. And then this is when kind of rays of light of sunlight would kind of go over the two nobles, and this would heal them, almost like healing light particles, but a little bit different on how it looks. It's almost kind of like a spotlight in that sense. So they'd be healed to, normal. So when it comes down to the training to actually become a magic knight in that week where it takes them to like train, I don't think Asta would train that much physically. He would try to see all the new like spells he has. I don't know how many spells Escanor has. I just know he has like Pride Flare and Cruel Sun. Those are the only two I really know. So if you guys want to tell me any, you can share that in the comments. So Asta would learn how to like kind of condense his magic into his like fists, kind of like Mario. I forgot her name. Is like Mario Leona, I believe. How she condenses her magic or fire magic into her fist. Asta does something similar, but he doesn't learn Mana Zone yet. So it would get to the day where they're making, the goodbyes to the people at the church. So they would start their journey towards the capital. The journey there would be easier since Asta has some sort of like magic that has to do with like fire and heat and like light. So they would have no reason to make fires because Asta could just heat the meat using his magic, and they wouldn't need like a campfire because Asta could just emit more heat than usual. So they wouldn't need that. So it'd be a pretty easy trip overall. So when they actually get to the capital, Asta would look around and says, my future kingdom looks pretty neat, right? And then this is when Yuno would be like, don't get ahead of yourself, because this is going to be my kingdom. And I think Asta would laugh, right? And they would see the castle where the Wizard King lives, and I think Asta would point this out and says, hey, look, it's my future castle. And he says, I might let you live there, right? And Yuno would be like, if you're lucky, I might let you live there because it's going to be my castle. And they continue looking around at the stuff that's for sale in the kind of farm, not farmers market, like just regular market, right? And they would get in line for the to take their number for the entry exams, the magical night exams. So the person keeping like the numbers would see Yuno's grimoire and be amazed, right? Since he has a 4-leaf grimoire. And he says, he would be like, I'm Yuno, I come from Hodge Village, here's my grimoire, right? And then the next person would be Asta, and he says, my name is Asta from Hodge Village, and he would kind of drop the book on the table, and it would make a loud noise since it's very heavy. And he'd be like, oh my, the teller or the person doing the numbers would be like, oh my gosh, another 4-leaf grimoire from the same place. And everyone behind them would be amazed and kind of suspicious that 2 commoners got a 4-leaf grimoire from an unknown village. And I think Sakura was behind Asta too, and he would also be kind of suspicious, right? And then this is when what's his name? They would go into the courtyard where all the birds are at, and I think Nero would still go towards Asta because he has the highest magic out there, and she knows that he's going to become part of the squad that collects all the magic stones. And Asta would be confused because those birds only go to people who have no like low magic, and he would question the bird. Like he would like start walking around with the bird on his like finger and says, he would talk to the bird, right? He says, I think you got the wrong person, because I don't know if you've noticed, but I have the most magic out of anyone here, right? And as he's like walking around and talking to the bird, right, people think he's like weird, but he's like a really buff guy, so no one wants to mess with him. And this is when he bumps into Yami, and they have that confrontation, but it's a lot different than it is in the anime. Yami would be like, where do you you're like, watch where you're going, kid. And he would question this for a second because he looks very like tall and buff for a kid. And this is when Asta would be like, looks like it's your lucky day. You got to meet the future Wizard King. And then this one, like, Yami would get angry at this. He would like grab his head and he would basically said, do you want to die, kid? And Asta would be like, I think that's a question you should be asking yourself. And then this is when Yami just gets furious and says, alright, looks like you made your choice. And this is when Asta would be just like release his like heat a bit to like burn Yami's hands, like, and to make him let go. And Yami would be confused and says, hey kid, what type of magic do you have? And then this is when Asta would be like, it's the best magic out there, the strongest, and what's going to make me the future Wizard King. I have, and he would have like his like finger in the air, kind of like Escanor, and he would kind of have like his like his hand over his like heart, his other hand, and he would have his other hand in the air with his finger pointing up, and he says, I have the strongest magic, sunlight magic. And Yami would be confused, like sunlight. What makes that different from regular light? But he's not saying this out loud, he's thinking about it. And Asta would go up to Yami, kind of touch his shoulder and says, since you're going to be my future subordinate, I'll let this slide this one time. And Yami's just pissed, but there's not really much you could do. And then this is when they do the testing. And Asta basically goes through all of it with no like difficulty whatsoever. And Yuno does the same thing, right? And Sakura's like scared of Asta since he's so good, and you know how his appearance looks and all that. So and Asta throughout the test, he's very cocky, right? That's how like Sunshine makes you. So when we get to the actual like fighting, the combat version of the test, I don't think that Sakura, which is the haha guy, I don't think he would go for Asta because he would be scared of him. So I think he would go for Yuno, since Yuno looks less intimidating and he wants to show off that he's better than a commoner. But the nobles that actually fight Yuno actually go for Asta. And Asta, not really showing off much of his magic, does kind of like, he does the same thing as Maria, I think it's Maria Leona, or Mario Leona, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but he does something like that where he condenses his magic into his fist, and as their spells are coming out of him, because I don't remember the nobles like affinity to magic. I think it was either like fire or like earth, I'm not sure, I don't remember. Or I think it was electricity. But basically, what Asta would do is he would just punch through it and punch the noble past the spell. And this would kind of knock out the noble pretty easily. And people would be confused, like they only saw a little bit of magic over his fist, since it's still visible when you're using that type of magic. And the fight with Yuno and Sakura would still, I think Yuno would win no problem, because he could just slice through his like defenses pretty easily. We would get to the point where everyone's getting voted or choosing what squad they want to be part of. You know, Yuno still goes with the Golden Dawn. It gives him the best chance to, become the Wizard King, right? When Asta goes up, to see what squad wants, and I think every squad would raise their hand, and he would ask the captains before he chose anything, and he would know their backstory since Sekiro was the one who told them. So he would say, for Goleon, Nozel, and William, he would ask them you three are the top candidates to become the Wizard King, right? And they would say yes. And you three are the best teams overall. Is that correct? And they would say yes. And he would say Asta would say I'm sorry to crush your dreams, but I'm going to be the future Wizard King. And to prove this, I'm going to pick the worst squad and make it the best. So your number one titles are going down. I'm going to beat you. Simple as that. And he would join the Black Bulls. And Yami, I think he would laugh since he's not the one getting made fun of, or he kind of is, but he's seeing the reaction that they're having, because they're going to be very annoyed and pissed off because of what he just said. And so would a lot of people, but they can't really do anything since he was chosen and a lot of people weren't. So we would get later on, Asta would not have to go to the bathroom because of the snake, because he doesn't eat it in this one. He would still meet the old lady, but he would decline the snake, which was the Wizard King. Then he wouldn't get poisoned or try to be poisoned by that lizard, I think. Yeah, so Sekiro wouldn't be in a position where he's able to poison anyone, since neither Yuno or Asta would be in the bathroom. So they would just, Asta and Yami, this would be later on in the nighttime. So Asta would be kind of how he is in the not the anime, but a little bit bigger, probably the same size as Yuno, so shorter than Yami at this point. And Yami would think that Asta was someone else, but he was actually Asta. He's so where did that buff guy with the sunlight magic went? He's but it's a different Asta. Well, not different, but his personality is more cold and distant, like I said before. He's you're looking at him, and Yami would be surprised, I thought, where's all this confidence and how come you shrank? And Asta would explain his magic. He's in the day I'm very buff and confident, but at night I become cold and distant and shrink a little bit. And Yami would laugh at him and says, what'd you say to me earlier about if I wanted to die or something? And he would try to threaten Asta, but Asta would just give him a kind of glare with a lot of malice in it, and Yami would kind of back down. He's not that intimidated by him, but he's kind of, because when Asta's when the night goes down, Asta becomes kind of edgy, kind of like more than So they would open the portal and they would go to the Black Bull's hideout. So I'm gonna end it here, and in the next part we'll go through the other stuff, the village, Saucy Village, and stuff like that. So with that being said, we reached over 500 subscribers, 540 I think at this point, and I'm gonna do the Q&A either today or tomorrow, so look forward for that. Did a review earlier this week, go check that out. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and with that being said, this is in the video, so yeah.